Welcome to another edition of The Greater Work, the audio outreach of Christ Worker Ministries. Listen in as experienced employee and minister, Sean Gibson brings biblical insights to help you worship God both in and with your labor. Now, let's get to work.
When God calls you from the vocation that you're currently in and into something new, He will bring you through a process of discovery, training, and personal development along the way. It's not going to be an overnight process, and frankly, it can take weeks, months, and even years really to get you where you need to be. During this process, God will demonstrate His involvement in our development by placing us in situations that frankly will require His hand of provision to get us through, all without using our own career experience and know-how. As the expression goes, where God guides, He provides. When God is guiding us through a season of, let's say, career change, He will give us the resources required to do so, even when we can't see it with our own eyes. In our last episode of the Greater Work podcast, we discovered how Jesus demonstrated God's ability to provide by utilizing fish and fishing for the disciples. And again, this was a potent teaching tool, as 4 of the 12 disciples were professional fishermen. And then, as you'll remember, out of the 4, 3 became the predominant influencers for the group. Using fish and fishing as a reference point helped the disciples to understand what Christ was doing. It was in their wheelhouse, and frankly, they understood what He was saying when He said anything that dealt with fish. Today, we're no different. When God is working in our hearts, He will teach us about provision through situations that you and I know and understand. And it's through these situations that we can learn His love, His care, and also His desire to provide for us. As we read in Hebrews 2 and 17, Jesus had to be made like His brothers in every way so that He could become merciful and faithful as a high priest in His service to God. Because Jesus is fully human and walked among us, He understands how to approach us on our level and relate to us through the things that we understand and know. In addition to fish and fishing that appealed to, again, a third of the disciples, Jesus also taught spiritual principles using agricultural stories so that His farming followers could understand and grasp the essential points about the kingdom of God and how it works. Because all callings and vocations are unique and customized to the individual by God, Jesus meets us where we're at and then brings us to where He wants us to be. After Jesus taught the disciples on their terms, little by little, He elevated them to new levels of understanding concerning God's kingdom without the use of common concepts like fish and agriculture. In this next stage of calling development, He built on the concepts that they had embraced and then empowered them to apply what they had learned. Let me give you an example of it. Luke 9, verses 1 through 3. It says, "Then Jesus called the 12 together and gave them power and authority over all demons and power to cure diseases. And He sent them out to proclaim the kingdom of God and to heal the sick. And He said to them, 'Take nothing for the journey.' And then He told them, 'No staff, no bag, no bread, no money, and no second tunic.'" After all of the practical teaching and hands-on experience, Jesus now felt that the disciples were ready and mature enough to walk in their calling and head out into the local communities and display what they had learned. Similar to taking the training wheels off, Jesus helped them ride out what they had learned on a Little League level, thankfully, before sending them out into the world, as we'll see in the book of Acts. And so it is with us. Before Christ will usher us into our destined calling, He will start us off with small tasks and acts of obedience in our current line of work. One minute, it may mean that you're using God's peace to calm down an angry customer. And then, with faithfulness and practice and diligence, He may develop you into someone that can bring His peace into a crime-ridden community, touching the lives of countless hundreds and even thousands. After Jesus gave His disciples the power and authority to minister to God's people, He informed them that they would also be financially cared for during this onboarding experience. By telling them not to provide provisions for themselves, it opened the door for them to experience the hand of God moving to provide for their needs when they needed it, all without using their vocational expertise and personal resources. After walking around and ministering to the sick, the disciples returned triumphantly from ministering freely in their local communities. However, shortly after their return, Jesus allowed them to encounter a need that seemed far less spiritual, yet very important: paying their tax bill. Let's look at Matthew 17, verse 27, and learn more about this. Jesus said, "So that we don't offend them, go to the sea, throw in a hook, and take the first fish that you catch. When you open its mouth, you will find a 4 drachma coin. Take it and give it to them for our taxes." When God guides you in your vocation, He will guide you, again, through a process of provision training. When Jesus told the disciples to catch a fish and pull out the gold coin from its mouth, this would be a new sort of miracle that they had not encountered before. This coin, again, would be used to pay the taxes and keep them from getting in trouble with the Roman governors. Although extremely practical, this provision was extremely creative and miraculous. Now think about it. How did Jesus know that a gold coin would be inside this fish's mouth? How was it precisely enough to pay for all of their taxes? In like manner, if your new role requires additional education, He will provide the tuition funding through sources, again, that you may not expect. If your new position mandates that you develop, let's say, a legal ministry organization, again, He will give you the resources that you need to set things up in ways, frankly, that may seem foreign to you. But trust Him and walk it out. A few months after having His disciples walk throughout the local towns and villages to minister, Jesus reminded the disciples of this previous occasion where He sent them out. He focused on how He sent them out to minister without their own supplies, and then He asked them if they lacked anything in materials in doing this ministry. Let's read about it in Luke 22:35. It says that Jesus asked them, "When I sent you without purse or bag or sandals, did you lack anything?" "Nothing," is what they answered. The response from them were all a resounding, "We lacked nothing." My friend, when God comes to you and begins sharing with you that He has a plan for your life, we all get excited. Unfortunately, too many people back down and get scared and frankly don't allow God's plan for their vocation to come to fruition because of fears of not having enough and not trusting Him for provision. Rest assured, when God calls you to do something, He's not going to throw you to the wolves without proper resources. This is especially true if He calls you to leave your current career and move towards something different. He will walk you through a process that will help you to understand that 1, He is God. 2, He loves you, He has a plan for your life, and finally, He will walk with you when you walk out that calling, and He'll even include providing for your financial needs. When God spoke to Joshua on assuming responsibility for the nation of Israel just after Moses' death, this is what He said, "Have I not commanded you to be strong and courageous? Do not be afraid, don't be discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." My friend, be strong and be courageous. Lay aside the dreams and desires of others for your life and career, including your own. Instead, follow the plan and calling that God has destined for you. While it may take weeks, months, or even years to walk out, trust Him and embrace the process. He will provide for you what you need to fulfill His plan, even if it's outside the confines of your current job.
Thanks for listening to The Greater Work, a Christ Worker Ministries podcast. The Greater Work is supported by hardworking listeners just like you. To learn more about Christ Worker Ministries and how you can become part of our growing outreach, visit christworker.org.